Did you guys print out the article, or do you need to see it from this? Okay, we're not going to do the whole article review. It's the relationship among structural empowerment. So let's read the abstract. Let's see if I can increase. I'm trying. I'm failing. Okay. You got the abstract over there? So what's the basic idea here? The more empowered you are, there you go. The more empowered you are, the less burned out you will be. So it's not a bad abstract. We'll get into just one or two details. So they measured burnout by the emotional exhaustion scale. How many of you are feeling emotionally exhausted right at this very moment? Just for the sake of the study. Thank you so very much. We'll be, we may need some more medication over here. So the idea is there's a scale that measures, have you ever seen the burnout scale? It's a pretty popular thing. But their questions basically, I'm emotionally exhausted, I'm fatigued to no end, and so if you're burned out, you answer high on emotional exhaustion. These other scales, psychological empowerment. The word empowerment means, I know what's going on, and the idea is if you're more empowered, you're going to feel less emotional exhaustion. What kind of, and actually let's go to the second article that I thought I brought up here. See if I can get to it. So this thing I found just to give you an example of what we can measure here. I think it's on page 5. Aha. So, how do we measure empowerment? Well, there are different ways to measure it. If you look at these scales, look at this question. How much opportunity do you have for these activities in your present job? Push that up a bit. So if somebody is feeling empowered, how would they answer on these questions? So the key for your note-taking, if you will, is on the scales that measure empowerment. A high number means what? A high degree of empowerment. So opportunity. If you answer these with a lot, that means you're empowered. How much access to resources do you have? Once again, if the answers are 5s, if you give 5s, that means you have what? A lot of access to resources. You may feel more empowered. Same thing on the first one. How much access to information? Anybody been watching the Bourne movies? You don't have access to that. You don't have the right to know. They all play that game all the time. Nobody's watched the Bourne movies? Not one. So there isn't a lot of access. So the idea is you could operationally define empowerment using these scales. And if you were doing research, these might be kind of useful. These are, what term did I use when I said sleep apnea before?
Operational.
Yeah, these are operational definitions. These are scales to measure empowerment, operational definitions. So we have these 3. So I am hoping from that little example, if I can go back to our main article, those scales are measuring a continuous variable, correct? So you can get a whole bunch of scores there. It's a continuous variable. How about emotional exhaustion? Do you think that's categorical or continuous? Yeah, they're both continuous. So if you argue that emotional exhaustion is continuous, if you argue that empowerment is continuous, then the type of statistics you will use here, you can use a correlation. What would be the prediction for the correlation here. What should happen if you are high on empowerment? You should be low on burnout. So positive correlations or negative?
Negative.
Negative. Let's see if that's actually the case. They did do their correlations correctly. We're going to go down to the table. And this is table 3. I'm hoping we can figure out a little bit about. Table 3. So, where do we want to go here? Let's go with resources. Let's just try a couple of these. You don't need to write out all of these. We're just going to try to understand a few. Is this a good or bad correlation? So it says resources, negative 0.444. What does the 1 stand for?
Those are the lower ends where people felt less empowered.
Well, the 1 stands for the variable burnout. They could put burnout right here. So this is the correlation. The 0.444, the negative 0.444 is the correlation between resources and burnout. That represents the correlation, that's how people do it, between resources and burnout. They should have put, instead of 1, they should write the word burnout up here. Good news or bad news? Is that good news or bad news for us?
Well, it's less than, it's on the lower end, but it's still negative.
So it's negative. What do the 2 stars say?
Correlation is significant at the 0.01 level.
The correlation is significant at 0.01. Is that good? Yeah. This is dumb. One-tailed. It should be two-tailed. But we're willing to overlook that.
Why would they do that?
Because they don't know what they're doing. Okay, but they mostly know what they're doing, so we can give them some credit here. 0.444. This is a very high correlation. That's very high for most research. I mean, the example I gave you, you don't ever see 0.87s, 0.91. This is a very strong correlation. This suggests what? That as you have more resources, more access to resources, that your burnout decreases. So this is a strong and significant correlation. The more you have resources, that's good. How about information? The more information you have, what happens to burnout? It also causes a decrease in burnout. How about support? Same thing. Now, opportunity. This will be the last correlation we cover here. This one is a little bit tricky. Is opportunity statistically significantly correlated with burnout?
Technically, yeah.
It is. 0.05, two-tailed, it is. So this is statistically significant. You would say the more opportunity, what?
It's less burnout.
The less burnout. But why might there be some pause here?
It's not a very strong correlation.
It's kind of a weak correlation. It's pretty close to what?
0.
0. This illustrates the very important issue. Remember we talked about a couple of weeks ago? Statistical significance versus real world. No, it's not even marginal here, but real world. I mean, this is significant, but if you've got 400 people, you could probably make anything significant. So,
It's not really applicable in real world.
yeah, and if you do the r squared on this, if you square this value for the coefficient, 0.15 squared is virtually nothing. So it is significant, you would say that, but you got to be careful. Just because something is significant does not make it real world. The other correlations are much stronger. If you go down, so that's comments about the table. I just want to show you a table so that you can look at a table like this and understand a few things. Comments?
If 1 is burnout, what are 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6?
They represent the other variables here. So they're saying everything should be twice in this table? Maybe not. So the 0.507, as support increases, so does opportunity.
Okay.
So those are predictor variables. Is this simple linear regression or multiple regression here? This is multiple regression. So, notice the strongest one is actually down here. Well, actually, no, we care about burnout mostly. Yeah, pretty strong for burnout. That 0.607, what is that saying? The more informal power you have, the more formal power you have. So power, right? The more power you have, the less burnout you have. I'm in charge, damn it. Okay, one other little faux pas to point out. We've just got one more thing to cover here. You might not know a lot about how to report results here, but can you see anything wrong with this line?
Yeah, you're out.
Ah. P equals 0.000. What's wrong with that? What's the right way to report that? P less than.
0.001.
So what does this show?
And you didn't have a statistician advising them.
So not only did the authors not have the right statistician or a stat guy working with them, but it also shows the reviewers and the journal people didn't know. Oops. Tragic flaw? No, but for stats people this is annoying. Last thing to cover and then we'll
Does
wrap.
it change the whole idea of, or the whole concept of the study? Because I'm doing it.
Not in this one.
Right now, and this terrifies me because I've been going on and on about why this is true and why this is happening, and now I don't know.
Go with it.
It's real.
You're fine. It's only when you get into graduate school where you really have to care about this kind of stuff and you really need to know this in detail. As I think I said previously, with article reading and so forth, there were 10 articles that mattered for me and I needed to know those 10. But if you really need to do this, it's a good skill to have. The final thing though that I wanted to show you was actually table 4. They actually did a regression somewhere in here. That might be getting too much. Let's just go over here. They did a multiple regression. Let's just go to the statement in the first column. Structural empowerment remained a significant predictor of burnout. So you could do multiple regression here, and they did that. I'm going to make this very light. And they found that the more empowered you were, the less burnout you had. So you could do not just a correlation, but can these variables predict burnout? And they can. The more empowered you are in a job, the less burned out. So this was a good example for me of this kind of thing being shown. Comments or questions? We are done with this.